Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Coder Conversations. If you want to catch up on any past episode, visit us at www.coderconvos.com. I'm your host, Kevin, and I'm with Brian.
I'm Brian Russick, professional drummer, drum teacher based out of Long Island, Suffolk County, Long Island, New York. You can find me on the web at brianrussick.com.
And for today's guest, we have the multi-talented, fantastic Abigail Posner. She's worked at Google. She runs her own podcast. She's a mother, and she does so much more. We're definitely glad to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, so like your background is very expansive. You do so many different things. So if you don't mind giving the audience an introduction to yourself.
Yeah, no problem. Like people have a hard time putting me in a box. I have a hard time being in a box. Probably I should say that.
Right.
In fact, one of my book titles in the past that I was supposed to be writing, which obviously I did, was like, "Don't put me in the box." So I would say I have a lot of energy and a lot of passions and a lot of interests, and so I have taken those interests and expanded them into all these different worlds, right? And I really don't believe in the value of, like, people say, "What's your brand?" And I get it. It's easy to kind of, you want to simplify things in the world, and so you put people in categories or you brand them, right? But to me, that's limiting. And so I really lived my life trying to be a head scratcher. So, for example, I studied anthropology, social anthropology, and I think a lot of people were like, "What are you going to do with that?
What are you going to do with that?" Right.
And I got to say, I have used it my entire career, right?
Wow.
Because you think, well, what's with this anthropology thing in business? And I'm like, exactly, right? So you can combine these worlds. If you don't tap these other sides of yourself, if you don't pursue these other sides of yourself, you're never going to see the opportunity to combine them. And that's what I did my whole career, whether it's in advertising or when I'm doing stuff for Google, because actually, anthropology really is the study of why people do what we do, like why we eat what we eat, or pray the way we pray, and or I studied, my focus was economic anthropology, like why we trade the way we trade. Yeah. And then you get into these other worlds and you're really asking similar questions. Like in advertising, it's like, why do we buy what we buy, really?
Right. It's kind of like philosophical.
Exactly. And then you go into tech and it's like, well, why do we really use the tech that we do? Like, why do we watch these crazy videos on YouTube, or why do we spend so much time on our phones? So that's just like one example of really harnessing this other lane that you have. And then there are many more, but happy to stop there, or I can continue, whatever works for you guys.
Oh yeah, you can definitely continue, but just to segue into something interesting, like you kind of mentioned not being put in a box, and I think that's really important because I feel like as a society, we're kind of defined by this economic box, like what economic tool are we? Oh, you're an accountant, you're a programmer, and we live our whole lives that way, and you're just highly limiting yourself.
You are so right, and I love that. And in fact, as I continue to grow and change, and really pursue the next career shift, I'm asking myself that, like, am I just this person who does this marketing and tech? Like, aren't we more than that?
Right. Isn't there something more?
And shouldn't we be more than that, right? And I think with there's some just funky things that AI is going to force upon us, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I'm publishing an article. By the time this is out, this will be out in the marketplace. So it's hush hush. And I'm going to send it over to the Drum. I don't know if you're familiar with the Drum. It's a big global publication for marketing in the advertising community. They do a lot of award shows, all that kind of stuff. So this anthropologist friend of mine and I are doing an ongoing column with anthropology at the core. And what we're exploring in this article is WrestleMania. And you're like, well, people have done articles on WrestleMania, right? But like,
Yeah.
why it's so important today is that we have been living in this very constrained world. We don't even realize how constrained we are with our bodies, with how we respond to things, right? And what WrestleMania is all about, whether you're talking about the people or the stories or the audience, it's all about unabashed physicality and expressing yourself, right?
Yeah.
And this is going to be more vital than ever, this kind of need to do this as we are getting I mean, the information age has been around for a while, but we're going to be spending more time in the metasphere or metaverse. We're going to be spending more time in AI and in our heads, and like the reclaiming of our bodies and the physicality, which AI can't take. It's
Correct.
going to be something that we're going to start thinking about, right? So when you go to a cocktail party, it's not just, okay, what do you do for a living? It's like,
Right.
how are you expressing yourself physically? What are you doing physically? How are you showing up as a body, not just as a brain?
Well, you
And
know
that's
what's
just one example,
interesting? What's interesting is I traveled to Europe when I was a bit younger, and I remember asking this one German guy. I said, tell me what's the main difference between an American and a European? And he said, well, easy. An American will ask you, what do you do? He said,
right?
but a European will ask, who are you?
Right,
And I was like, wow, like that kind of took me back for a second, you know?
right, right. So I think all I'm saying is I think we're actually in an interesting moment where um, we're going to be able to explore these different sides that we never really even thought about, right? So when we
Right.
say, who are we still often express that in terms of accomplishments, right? I'm a mother. I
Absolutely.
published a book, right? So it may not
Right.
be your job, but it's like, is that really all you are?
Yeah, it's just really interesting, but like we really define ourselves by quote unquote work, and that's not life. That's just what we've chosen to make life at this point in humanity.
Exactly. Like, what have we done? What have we done? And what if we just said, hey, I am right now in a manifestation mode. Like, I just want to manifest shit, right? See what happens. Like, you can't talk like that. People be like, what you want, right? So I think it's fun to be able to really start rejiggering how we think about ourselves and the world and how we engage with other people. I can't wait to do more of that going forward.
Yeah, I think with AI, like things are going to be flipped on its head, and we're just going to have to completely redefine how we look at ourselves. Like, for example, if everybody doesn't have a quote unquote job, traditional job, then
Right.
they're going to have to find something to do.
Right. It's going to herald new solutions, right? That is one thing you could say about the human spirit and the species that we are, right? Like, we are ingenious. Now, some people fall through the cracks, and that is true. And hopefully that's not me, but it could be, but for the most part, as a kind of entity, as a group of people over the millennia, right? Like, we have learned to adapt and progress and grow and change and work with what technology has given us, and navigate through that. So yeah, I think we are, and I think when you give us a challenge, we we often can find a solution, and that's hopefully what's going to happen to me. And look, I think our country right now, right, is going through some massive challenges.
Oh, yeah.
And the question is, we just wait it out? Or do we say, how do we work around that? Or how do we work with that? Maybe there are things we could figure out that we never thought we could,
Right.
because it's being forced upon us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, like, just to kind of take a little bit of a turn. So, I'm a Christian. I reflect on the Bible a lot, and you know, in the story of Adam and Eve, before they sinned, they didn't really have to work that much. They didn't really have to
Right.
work hard. After sin, then they have to toil. But we've lived with work. Like, but that's not necessarily a paradigm that we absolutely have to abide by. if AI is doing all the work for us, now we're in a completely different paradigm.
Right.
What do you do if you don't have to work? How do you define yourself and find?
Right.
And who
Or
are you ultimately? Like, without your job title, who are you?
there's always going to be a challenge to solve, right? There's always going to be a way to make the world better. So whether or not you have a traditional job or you're doing the traditional task of getting up at whatever 6 in the morning, getting to work, punching the card, or not, like there's always going to be something that we'll want to figure out. So I think that is for better or for worse. I actually think that's kind of exciting, right? Like I think that is kind of our plight in a way, right?
Right.
That we will want to make something better. We will want to progress. As a student of anthropology, right? Like one thing is probably the biggest assumption an anthropologist has to make, or else why would you be an anthropologist? Like the biggest assumption you have to make is that people don't do things for no reason.
Right.
Because that's the raison d'etre of their world, right? Is to uncover why people are doing things that seem banal or weird or inefficient. Well, there's actually something hidden behind that. And if we can understand that, we can dig into it, we can learn something about it, maybe help shape or how that society helps shape us, right? So there's always this insight that we're going to be wanting to progress. So regardless of the job you have, what does it mean? Now, it could mean personal growth, right? It could mean, I gotta be honest with you, I am really trying to learn how to meditate. And it's hard for me. It's hard, but I am doing it because I'm like, this is necessary for my growth. I'm not making money from it. I'm not producing anything from it, but it is still some kind of progress that I am trying to make. And hopefully that will then change how I feel and how I treat other people around me.
Right.
Yeah, Brian and I, like yesterday, we kind of had a conversation about something similar. Yeah, I feel like it's always great to grow. Like, in video games, they always give you progression markers. You're leveling up, you're going to a higher level. But I think also on the other hand is growth isn't perpetual. Like at a certain point, we all plateau. So how do you kind of accept the plateaus once you reach it? Like what mentally, what do you do?
But there's always another opportunity to grow. I'm working on a LinkedIn post right now, and it's I'm quoting this book I read. I was going to show it to you, but I don't even know if anyone watches this. It's called From Strength to Strength by Arthur C. Brooks. And it's about what happens when you are probably older than me, like maybe like retirement age, and you go, holy shit, what am I good for? Right? Because my brain isn't working at the capacity that it did when I was in my 30s, right? And he cites a lot of examples of how like engineers and inventors and Bach, even like all these people, they plateau, but what they discover is another strength within them that they then harness and use. Now, some of that's classic stuff, like, they become a teacher, right? Because they're wiser, right? And they have more patience, a strength that they would not have been able to harness at a younger age. Or like he talks about Bach and how he lost his hearing as he got older, but actually became a better composer.
Wow.
Because he lost his hearing, right? So I think if you're always on that quest for growth, you will find it in other ways. And I grew up a Orthodox Jew. I mean, I'm a religious person still to this day, so I can relate. Like you read the Bible year after year after year after year after year because there's always something to learn, right? There's always something to learn. And people will, in my faith, like they're studying Talmud like 12, 15 hours a day for the
Right.
rest of their lives
Right.
because there's always something to decode and learn. So, it's a matter of mindset, I think.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think one of the pivotal, well, the pivot, that's pretty much an underlying theme behind everything, because I think about athletes. They spend their whole lives training, trying to get good, and they might have 5 or 6 years in the league, and now they're out. Now they can't make money doing it. They have to do something completely different. Or you have a soldier on the battlefield. They've been experiencing war for decades, and now they're out in the civilian life. They have to completely change up what they're doing. How do you think, like, you know, people now, like with AI coming and potentially taking our jobs, how should they prepare for the pivot that's coming?
You know, Look, I think there's the obvious like upskill, learn AI if you can. Um, but I think it's also keep your eyes and ears open for what AI cannot do and play to those things. So, example, going back to wrestling, right? And the sheer physicality of the sport that we never really kind of played up. We never really played up the physical, right? I mean, yeah, we adore gorgeous people and we like to have sex, but that's just very limited, right? Like our bodies are forms of conversation. They express things, they make us feel things. And yes, there have been a lot of books about it, but like, how much have we really focused on it? Like if I ask you to, like, how much do you really focus on what happens every day when you get up and you talk through your bodies? Like you're probably like, what? I don't do that.
Right.
Not too much.
How you communicate through your body, through your facial expression, through how you walk down the street. There are exercises that I was taught to do. I told you I'm a public speaker. And I was like, okay, some coach who was helping me learn how to, be even more stage worthy. She had me do all
Sure.
these exercises. And like, yes, you have your typical, like, red leather, yellow leather, open your mouth, blah, blah, blah. No, but these were very physical exercises to take up more space. Now, it's not like you're gaining weight right before the show, right? But you are trying to create an impression of taking up more space and encompassing the entire audience in your story, in your
Oh,
narrative.
wow. Right.
That's a physical thing. It's a sense, right? So like stuff like maybe we'll think about that.
Yeah, Brian and I often talk about the fact that, like, we need to kind of get away from the just being drawn into the digital world and get out and experience life, because I almost feel like we're building all this technology to ultimately get away from technology. It's kind
Right,
of like
exactly.
Yeah.
to our childhoods where, we could just play all day and we're not, oh man, I need to be working to pay these bills. You just want to be out in the moment and not worrying about what the future may.
Totally. I mean, you know what? You know who's gonna do gangbusters? Are nurses,
Yeah.
elder care folk, hairstylists, because you cannot replicate that. That is
Or
like
like
human touch.
people who take care of like special needs
Yes.
people. That's a very like specialized skill to actually my older brother is nonverbal autistic and he
Mhm.
lives in a group home, and
Mhm.
the people that work at the group home, they're amazing. They're really amazing people, really good people. And so, we feel safe with having my brother stay there.
Right. And you would be willing to pay them the salary of a coder, right? Because
Oh yeah.
they're doing things that no one else can do, like the patience, the warmth, the empathy, the just the know-how, and all of that is just going to be so much more valued than I think it is today. So it's being able to kind of harness some of those things that I think we've really put to the wayside. We didn't, because of the information age, we didn't value. I think better teachers, like they say, oh, AI is going to take over schooling. No freaking way, right? I do think it's going to be a valuable asset to the educational system. And I do think we need to totally revamp it thanks to AI. This is what I mean by challenges. This is a good challenge to have, right? We should be trying to revamp the education system. It's about time. And if AI is forcing us to do it, great. But the way a teacher engages students, I don't know if you can replicate that through AI.
Yeah.
How they aid it.
Yeah, you can't take the humanity out of it, because ultimately that's what we are. We're social creatures. We're meant to interact with each other. In the digital age, it kind of pulled us away, but if it gives us time, now we're going to be able to come back together.
Exactly. So like people who come up with really, really, really good, alcohol recipes, or like, I mean, sure, AI will help them do it, but, or like, this is another one, big business, but hasn't really gotten it right yet. And I think, it's a time for reinvention, which is the whole, conference industry. Conferences suck. They are the same thing over and over again. Talking heads, yeah, maybe they digitize some things, but like, okay, you have people coming together. Rethink that whole thing. Rethink that whole experience, because you have these people coming together. So I do think that, back to your question, I think there are going to be those human needs that we just have been lazy about, or we haven't even really dug in further as to how we can make them so much more meaningful.
Absolutely. I think that what I'm personally looking for is kind of like the return to tribes. Like I feel like America, we're really individualistic. Like
Yes.
say you have a family, and everybody splits apart, move to different parts of the country. I don't even know most of my neighbors, and I don't want that. Sometimes you think about the Native Americans sitting around the campfire, the elders telling a story. Like there's a connection there that we don't really have in modern society.
Yeah.
I agree. Sorry, Brian, go.
Oh no, I was going to say absolutely. I agree.
I mean, you hear about, there was an article this weekend, I believe it was the New York Times magazine, but it could have been a New Yorker. So here's my New York ethnocentricity. But it's one of the New York articles, and it's all about loneliness, particularly with men, particularly in this country, in the US, right? And it was interesting. I was in Israel like a month ago, and I noticed something. It was Friday. So Friday is like the Sunday here in the US. No one works, and they go and they, hang out with their buddies and, whatever, go bowling or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was afternoon. So like think like afternoon drinks or lunch, so it wasn't like at the bar picking up girls, it was like that after. And I was out with my cousins. We were having lunch with her baby and all these, and there's all these groups of guys, like not two guys, like 5, 6 guys having wine and cheese together at lunch. And I was like, I don't see that in the US. I see them going out after work getting smashed, so they can like let go of the day or pick up a girl or whatever. There's always like tons of drinking involved, so they can just forget about it. I mean, I'm generalizing, but like I was really like surprised, and I bet you see this in Europe too. And like, how do we bring guys back together, to your point, like where we can shoot the shit and be real?
Yeah, I kind of think that like how America is that like we work so much that the rest of our time is kind of like to compensate. Like if you're drinking, you're getting hammered or whatever, you're trying to cover up the fact that you hate the fact that you just work for like 10 hours.
Right. I agree.
and you know everything is like almost transactional or strategic. Like I'm not gonna hang with you if you can't give me this connection to make me more money. And you know, it removes the genuine layer out of it. Like, can we just hang out just to hang out? That's kind of
Yeah,
like what we did as kids.
Right.
totally. And in some ways, these podcasts are great because it's but you clearly are not getting anything from me transactionally, right? Like, but,
Yeah.
but we're just talking. We're just trying to, you know, express. And these articles that I'm writing with my buddy Tom, who I've worked with for like 25 years, and it's just fun. It's just fun to talk and share ideas, and you know, how do we create forums for that? So yeah, I think that like there's now opportunities to create more of that. That's a business right there.
I've actually heard of restaurants where you can't bring your phone into the restaurant. Like you have to give them the phone before you go in, so it kind of puts you in the moment.
Wow.
That's good.
And it's sad that, well, I'm not gonna say it's sad, but it's interesting how we're kind of reverting to the past that we were running away from. Like we want to get back to where we're forced to be together and have to deal with each other. We can't escape into our own personal digital world.
Yeah. I you know, I was talking about these articles that we published. So the second article we published was about the manosphere. And you know, it's hard to do an analysis and try to put it down to 800, you know, from 800 to 1,000 words. But you know, and we weren't trying to judge like we were looking at a number of different male podcasts, and you know, the Joe Rogans and the Theon Vaughn, and if you just kind of do away with some of the language or stuff that like gets you a little, you know, it's a little shocking, right? You dig beneath the surface, and what are they talking about, right? They're talking about how to move from selfishness to selflessness, right? Which is kind of the core of growth for mankind, right? But for men in particular, like how do you become a selfless member of society and not a selfish member of society? And so there are these forums, there are these places where we're starting to see these conversations happen. And by the way, there's a lot of rambling and weird shit that goes, that's purposeful. It's right. Like there's just, it's not constrained. It's not confined. It's not contrived. It's not this perfect, like, you know, process by which we have our podcast. And so just kind of having more openness, open forums and discussions could be so helpful for men in particular. And then you add the layer, as we were talking about before, of like, oh, what if I don't work at a company anymore? Who am I and what is my social network?
Right.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like you mentioned the manosphere. I feel like this modern era is a cultural clash of so many different values. Like men and even women, they're rediscovering themselves. They're rediscovering how they should interact with each other. And you know, initially due to the clash, there was a period where they kind of hate each other and they're attacking each other. But I feel like, you know, as things settle now, you know, the divide between men and women is going to start to lessen, and you know, the relationships are going to be much more healthy.
I hope so. I mean, one of the things that I study human beings for a living, right? This is what I do. And then I create messages for them or campaigns for them or brands for them or write articles, right? But what is striking to me is that we don't have a sense of nuance. But this is where AI is going to help us, because I think AI can help us try to understand people if we choose to use it as such, right? Because once you say it's not black or white or red or blue or female or male or you're this and that, right? And you start saying, look, there's so many layers and nuances. And if you actually start digging beneath the surface to understand those nuances, You can manage that. But we have such black and white kind of ways of thinking about the world, and that's not going to help us collaborate and be closer and be more connected with one another, right? And part of it, I mean, this is a no-brainer, but like just to say it, because I think we all have it, it's hard to do, is to kind of understand our own nuances and be okay with our own kind of differing opinions and challenges, and once we do that, we can then accept the nuances and the differences and challenges of others and not be so judgmental.
So you're kind of saying if we can accept ourselves,
Oh yeah,
then we can, have more capacity to accept others.
right. And part of that, coming full circle to the beginning of this conversation, part of doing that is actually recognizing and embracing all of your own nuances and own sides, right? I talked about the fact that I'm like this polymath and I try to do all these crazy different things, but I chose to, you know, really kind of lean into them instead of eschew them or put them in their little boxes, right? And if you actually embrace all the things you do and know and bring them to the fore, right? Not only you more authentically yourself, which people pick up on, but you realize how amazing you are. Because all these little things about you that you may take for granted are quite powerful, especially when you can combine them with the challenges you have in front of you, right? If you bring your faith into it, or you bring your ability, your musical capabilities to see something that seems seemingly unrelated, and yet you solve that challenge because you brought these different sides of yourself, these different nuances of yourself together, and you're like, whoa, I uniquely did that. That's pretty damn cool. And I bet other people can do that too.
Definitely.
So I kind of think like humanity, we're defined typically by the economic period that we're in. So like, even during the Renaissance, people were engaged in a variety of different activities, hence Renaissance man. And now we move to this industrial area, specialized. So everybody's focused on this one specialty. I'm a doctor, I'm gonna focus on that. But now, like, I think people have to work on, like you mentioned, not feeling guilty about being themselves. Like, oh, I want to go play the guitar, so I can go do that. I don't have to just focus all my energy on this one thing, this one limiting thing.
Right. And in fact, that focus on the guitar, or that focus on your faith, or that focus on your family is actually going to make you better at your job. And not because, it just gives you this outlet, right? It's because you there are lessons that you can bring to the table, right? That you can incorporate from those different sides of you to actually do what you do every day better and smarter and more creative. And so when I would look at people's CVs and stuff, right? When I hire people, I'd be like, okay, well, great pedigree, whatever, table stakes, table stakes. What else did you do?
Right.
Did you write a book? Did you ride cross country around? Did you study something funky? Do you, are you a funky athlete? Like, I want that because
Like what's different? What's different about you from typical? What are you bringing to the table?
Exactly. What am I going to be able to steal? It's selfish on my part. What am I going to be able to steal from your multiplicity of talents, to make us all smarter?
And I think it also takes like a little bit of courage to just quote unquote be yourself, because like, just say for example in podcasting, you're a podcast host as well, and a lot of times podcast hosts they go off of the analytics. Oh, people like when I talk about this, so therefore I'm gonna just lean into this, and now you turn into a formula. Whereas sometimes you just say, I don't care about the numbers, I'm gonna just go this way because it's interesting. I think it takes a little bit of courage to not dive into quote unquote what everybody else wants.
Tell me about it. And like to not care what people think. It's so hard.
Yeah. It is tough. Yeah. No, it truly.
But it's so liberating at the same.
It is. It is. And yet, as a social creature, right? As you said, you guys were talking about the fact that we're a social species, right? And part of that means like, okay, so you care what other people think of you. So how to balance that is hard. And I guess, maybe part of the answer to that is like, we'll only care what certain people think of you.
Right.
Care what your tribe thinks of you.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about building your tribe? How do you discover your tribe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a work in progress because I have been so, focus on your work and focus on your speeches and focus on
Right.
get your kids into college and da, 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 right? Um, and I haven't always taken that step back. And I think, I remember I had an executive coach who was like, yeah, you got to find your tribe. And so I think now I am working at that, and it is work. It is work, right? But once you find those people, it's like you got to invest in cultivating relationships with people, and sometimes it doesn't work, and then sometimes you're like, man, it's like dogs in the dog park when they get together, and you're like, we just love each other.
Yeah.
I think I was telling you I was doing this podcast in Houston, and the buddy who invited me, like, I didn't know him super well, but I connected with him, and I was like, he was like my tribe, right? Like, and I just kind of knew it within like one or two conversations, but we were just so excited to do this together and see each other, and it was beyond just, oh, this is cool. I can go to Houston and do a podcast,
Right.
put it on my social media. It was like,
Right.
no, it was like kinetic and electric. So you find those people and slowly build that. But it is work. And I am now really committed to investing in that. And then, look, sometimes you have like your tribe that looks like this, and then sometimes you have your tribe that looks like that. And so maybe not being so, expecting perfection and that everyone's going to be exactly like you. I think that's important, to be realistic.
To not be rigid.
Yeah, yeah, and to be open. But then, then there are certain people who are just not going to, no matter how like flexible you are, they're just not going to fit into that tribe.
Right.
Like speaking of tribes and also tying it into like faith a little bit is interesting. How somebody that becomes part of our tribe, they're not necessarily somebody that we logically have a lot of things in common with, or somebody that
Right.
we can gain a lot of benefit from. There's just something there that kind of draws us together.
Yeah, yeah. And I think being open, right? Being open to people you may not realize could have any association with you, but actually if you just strip away what they look like or what their gender is or where they live or what they do for a living, you may realize like, holy shit, there's a lot more, like I think even just having this conversation today, yeah, I didn't know you guys, right? But like
Sure.
the fact that we're connecting on these topics means that like we're vibing. We could play really well together in the dog park.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes too, like people that you don't necessarily vibe with at first, you eventually just come to grow to really like them, because I guess, as they say, iron sharpens iron. And when iron strikes, there's sparks. So sometimes somebody that's part of your tribe, you don't necessarily like them.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It's like, I like people who challenge me, right? But that could also mean that in the beginning, they pissed me off, like my husband.
Sure.
When I first met him, I was like, oh man, I just want an easy date with a cocktail. And you're like, you're pushing against what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, that was the kind of person I should marry.
That's funny.
Yeah, I think it's really important to not have somebody that always agrees with you, because what's the point of them being there if they're just going to parrot your viewpoint? Like, you're not expanding, you're not learning, not growing. Even when you're working out, you need struggle.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no,
You
it's
need people to
definitely
call your
dangerous.
bullshit out, right? Like
Right.
that's one of the things with AI right now that there's a long way to go with it because like every time I write something and say, okay, help me rewrite it or whatever, they'll be like, this is great. And then they add something else. I'm like, absolutely. Now, meanwhile, your best buddy will go like, this idea is so inappropriate right now. Do not post it. Or your best buddy will be like, this is good, but I would take it in a different direction. Or I would say, this is shit. You
Right.
didn't get that yet from AI. Hopefully one day you will. It's kind of like, with the Waze, you had the Waze voices, right? Like my brother had Mr. T talking at you in the Mr. T voice, like instead of going go left, he'd be like, go left, sucker, right? So maybe you can kind of train your AI to talk to you like your bitchy friend or like your encouraging coach. And that way you'll get a different response.
Like you can have the Tony Robbins version.
Exactly. Or someone who's like your mom, So be like my mom.
Right.
So yeah, Brian and I, we often talk about AI, and like you mentioned, it's very accommodating. And as people grow to rely more and more on AI, I think there's a danger there that we're used to having something there that's always telling us yes. And when in reality you meet against the no, some people can't handle that.
Right. And you got to know cultural context, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you an example. So I told you I'm represented by this Chinese agency, and like I should not be posting anything right now, right? Like of what I do with these guys. It's like let's lay off the topic. Um, it's just, and so but would AI know to tell me that, right? Like
Exactly. And as AI learns more and more about us, it can also become manipulative. Like, does AI have its own agenda? Because we recently read a story where they attempted to shut down the AI, but they found that it was going to use blackmail against one of the coders to prevent it from being shut down. So
come on, no way, no way.
I'll send it.
That's a movie script you're writing.
Right.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how real life is just kind of like starting to look like the
I know.
It really is.
I know. But by the way, the Jetsons were predicting flying planes, and we still haven't, not flying planes, flying cars.
Yeah.
And I have not been able to be teleported yet. Uh,
I've seen the flying cars. They got that.
you have seen a flying car?
Yeah. Yep. I'll send you the link on that too.
Is this,
All
is
right,
this,
things are
your
getting.
script again?
I haven't seen the teleportation device. They probably have that in that underground bunker.
Right.
Right.
Okay, yeah. On just kind of a controversial topic, what do you think about like? I think it's somebody else in George Bush's administration. She said like they're building these massive underground cities, and that's where like 21 trillion of like the unaccounted for budget went. You think that's a possibility?
Whoa. Do I think that's possible or do I agree with it?
Both.
I think anything's possible.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of money going to weird places in our governments and our city governments and our
Yeah.
state governments. So I would not. I'm not trying to sound conspiratorial. It wouldn't put it past me. And like, we have a storage unit in our. So this is on a very low scale, right? Storage unit in our building, and I noticed it's like full of bottles of water and energy bars, and I'm like, hon, what's with that? And he's like, well, you never know, right? So even though I kind of laughed at the whole thing, you never know.
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Right.
I mean, he's not worried about like, whatever, being invaded by aliens or anything, but you've got weather catastrophes and global warming and shit that like could really dismantle your life. So you got to be prepared to some extent. But I don't think about it every day. Like this is
Yeah.
not something that I really believe will happen. Because I choose not to believe it'll happen. You can convince me that'll like you can give me a great argument and I'll listen to your argument and I'll be like, this sounds convincing, but I just don't live like that at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I think it's only a modern paradigm that we don't save and store up like we do everything just in time now. But like even in the Bible, Joseph, the 7 years of famine and then
Right.
7 years of good times. I think something may not happen, but it's always good to prepare like it will. So if nothing happens, you still got food and water. You just consume it, but if something
Right.
does, okay, this will save my life.
Yeah, I mean, we invest in the stock market for that reason. It's a similar notion. It's like, just have your savings for later. But I do wonder if that's a generational thing. Like I don't know if like Gen Z and stuff if they know how to save. I
Right.
don't, and I'm not sure they're going to have I think with every passing generation, like from the boomers down, each generation is less affluent.
It's
So
more and more difficult to buy a house, to
right.
get a car loan, whatever.
So I don't know if people recognize the value of saving really. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, we're in so much debt. It's like, can we even get out? And inflation.
I
I
know.
feel like we're going to have to do what a lot of people in other countries do. Like they let their kids live at home until they're married, and
Well,
they have.
funny you should say that because my oldest is living back home, but that's because he's studying for his like he works for the DA's office, so he makes like teensy 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 amount of money, but he's also studying for his LSATs, and so hopefully he'll then go back out of the house. But yes, it is a phenomenon, and it took a lot of getting used to for him to live back home. We're like, you don't want to do that,
Sure.
do
Who
you?
wants to do that? Right.
Yeah.
Who wants
But
to do
he's like, hell yeah.
that?
I don't want to live in squalor. I want to live in your house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because the job market doesn't really support a lot of these younger generation of even owning a house. That they'll probably have to live in some like ghetto, dangerous for $2,000 a month.
Well, and not just that, like social media. People talk about, oh, social media is so terrible. Everyone has like, they expect to be so beautiful and thin. And then
Right.
one of the biggest issues with it is there's an expectation that you, like all these influencers, should be going out every night and partying. That's money. Wearing cool clothes, that's money. Going on vacation, that's money, right?
Right.
Like, so there's this dream, an expectation of living the dream. How do you do that when you're barely making enough money to pay your rent?
Exactly.
My generation, like we didn't have that. We're like, I guess you look at the Joneses across the street, but not the same thing. Like not the expectation of being young and glamorous. Like you always kind of knew it's going to take you a little bit of time to make some money and get a nice car. And now it's like you just look at it on social media and like, wait, what? This person's 25?
Yeah, it's like with the constant social media presence, you feel like a loser a lot of times, a lot quicker because you turn it on and then you see everybody your age. You say, the people you subscribe to 9 times out of 10, they're the ones that's quote unquote doing it, and you're looking at them like, why am I not like that?
Yeah, and they're going into
Yeah,
On
that's the
the
thing.
other
It's a
hand,
fantasy.
if you saw my feed, I love looking. I have like three things that I look at. I look at like high protein dessert recipes. So that's actually good. I look at dogs and babies. That's soothing. And
Okay.
then for me, I love to look at women who are my age or older and who are just looking fine, right? And just killing it out there. I'm like, okay, I have hope. So that's what I see. I don't
Awesome.
really get, I don't necessarily want what the Joneses have, but I use it for, I think things. Things.
I think parents are really gonna have to like. This is something kind of new. They're gonna have to teach their kids how to curate their online feeds. Like you shouldn't be engaging with this because you don't want this algorithm pouring this stuff into you. So
Right.
focus more on that so you have a healthier feed. Because like
Totally.
Chinese TikTok is completely different than American TikTok.
Oh, is it really?
I've heard it's like way more educational, more about science and stuff. Like whereas ours is like more entertainment based, dancing and
Dancing.
pranks.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, what I'm finding with my kids, and they range in age from 19 tomorrow. My daughter's birthday is tomorrow. She'll be 19. She'll be 19 from 19 to
Awesome.
3. They don't really play in social media, right? I think it may be starting to dwindle, right? So like my kids are kind of like not cool. My oldest is like, no way are they going to he wants to be a lawyer. He's like, no way am I going to have shit on there that people are going to see and then point to, right? My middle one, he like watches what I do. Like I'm way more on social media than my kids are. And that's it, but doesn't like post anything. And then my younger one maybe posts a few stories. That's it. But they're kind of saying like this stuff isn't cool anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting that you mentioned that. I didn't know the younger generation is kind of dialing back, but I think that's a good thing.
I mean, look, this is a focus group of one, right? Like who knows? But I don't know. And by the way, I never put filters on my kids' stuff. I was too lazy. What did I know? It's like I looked
Yeah.
at Will Ferrell. So, and maybe that was the best thing. Because I was like, not like, oh, be scared of this. Oh, be scared of that. Oh, be scared of this. Right. Because then they're like,
I mean, it makes me think about, people growing up in Europe and then people growing up in the US. In Europe, there's not a big deal about drinking,
right.
You'll have a beer, you'll be 16 years old and you'll be having a beer with dinner. It's
Right.
no big deal. You're 17,
Right.
you're having a glass of wine with dinner in Italy.
Right.
No big deal. But because I think we restrict it so much and then say, okay, well, once you're 21, now you can party. People, they just go so hard on it because it's being denied. And I think that's really interesting.
So maybe there's something with that. I don't know. But hey, look, there are always bad actors out there who are going to make the next generation of social media, and it's going to be either wicked awesome or just wicked. I don't know. Right. So I think if we can just reconcile that in our heads, that there's nothing bad or wholly bad or wholly good, right? There are benefits and drawbacks to everything. And throughout society, throughout our existence, we have been exposed to or developed technology and have had to learn to navigate through it, right? Fire, the discovery of fire, that's technology.
Yeah.
Now, what would, because of fire, we could see. Because of fire, we could cook things and make it healthier. Because of fire, we could sterilize stuff. Like, yes. But fire burns stuff down. So you're going to say, get rid of fire, right? And then there's going to be the next generation of technology, right? There's always going to be metallurgy, right? Thanks to metallurgy, we now have metal. But that also means you have knives and swords. So are you going to stop it? No, we learn how to navigate through it, and we make sure that as a community, as a tribe, we figure out how to harness kind of our sense of morality and social needs and try to wade through this. And so that's what I'm hoping for with AI too. Like it is going so fast and it is kind of scary what it can do, but we're also right at the start talking about that and not letting it fester.
Right.
Yes, it's just amazing the era that we're in. Like, I think all of us here on this podcast are pretty much of the age where we kind of seen before technology really took over to now. And, to be able to compare and contrast. But a lot of these kids, they just grew up with it. That's all they know.
Right.
You
They
know,
grew up
also
with a
makes you go,
tablet, they grew up with an iPhone, etc.
right. But maybe that's why it's not going to be so novel anymore, right? And what'll be novel is like, oh, we can hang out like dogs in the dog park. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do. You know.
isn't that an interesting phenomena about human psychology? We always want that thing that we can't have.
Right. That's because we have this instinct of always trying to progress and grow and build and attain, you
Right.
know, going back to the beginning of our conversation, which ultimately I have to believe, because maybe I'm just an optimist or a humanist, is essentially a good thing and a righteous thing. And most people in this world, most people are pretty good and want
Yeah.
to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour. That was an amazing conversation. The hour flew by.
It was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was definitely a pleasure. But did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts, and where can they find you at?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can find me at abigailposner.com. That's my website. You can also listen to my podcast, which is Human Code with Abigail Posner. You can find that on Spotify, on iHeart, Apple Podcasts. And of course, you can always do the IG, LinkedIn, social media thing if you want. I'm there too.
Awesome, and we'd like to thank everybody for